A forgotten child confronts a millionaire in the town square with words that shatter his perfect world. "You promised you'd come back, Daddy." What no one knew was that this little girl with the aged look held the secret that connected two souls. Separated by fate, when the past finally catches up to the present, the choices of a powerful man will forever change two lives marked by the pain of abandonment. Subscribe to the channel for heartwarming stories every day. The gold wristwatch read exactly noon when the millionaire adjusted his Italian silk tie and sat on the marble bench in the town square. It was his little ritual every Tuesday, 15 minutes away from phones, meetings, and the constant pressure that came with his business empire. Here, in the middle of the city he had helped transform with his investments, he allowed himself to be just another anonymous observer. The autumn sun painted long shadows on the paved ground. Around him, the typical lunchtime bustle, hurried executives with sandwiches in hand, tourists photographing the century-old fountain, vendors hawking trinkets. A panorama he observed with clinical detachment, as if watching a silent film through a dusty window pane. His eyes wandered distractedly over the crowd when he noticed the unusual commotion near the fountain. Two uniformed security guards were dragging a small, struggling figure away from the center of the square. At first, just another urban scene he had witnessed dozens of times, homeless people being removed to maintain the cleanliness of the public space. The girl had dark hair tangled by the wind, worn clothes, and bare feet that barely touched the ground as she was carried by the burly men. What stood out the most, however, was her gaze. There was none of the typical fear of children, but a fierce determination that seemed out of place on that young face. That's when the first scream cut through the air. "You promised you'd come back, Daddy. You left me here." The millionaire felt as if an invisible hand squeezed his heart. That voice, sharp, desperate, but with a cadence that was strangely familiar, caused an instant wave of nausea. His fingers tightened on the edge of the bench until his knuckles turned white. The crowd around him fell silent, as if someone had turned down the volume of the world. The security guards hesitated, looking around, searching for the target of that accusing shout. The girl struggled with surprising strength, her teary eyes fixed in a single direction, directly at him. Impossible, the millionaire thought as a cold sweat ran down his back. The only woman he had ever loved had disappeared 8 years ago after a terrible argument in which irrevocable words were spoken. She was 4 months pregnant. He had never seen her again. It was a coincidence, he tried to convince himself, even as his feet were already lifting him from the bench, guided by a force beyond reason. His body moved against his will, each step towards the girl seeming to cut through a thick layer of concrete. The years of discipline that had built his fortune now kept his expression seemingly impassive. But inside, a storm was brewing. Buried, memories emerged like ghosts. The pregnancy test on the table, her hurt look on the last night, the picture he had burned in a fit of rage and remorse. A few feet away, the girl stopped struggling. Her eyes, a deep brown that he knew all too well, stared at him with a mixture of anger and hope that cut like a knife. "This child can't be my daughter," he repeated silently, even as he observed the stubborn chin, the shape of the eyes, the small birthmark near her temple, features that the mirror showed him every morning. The entire square seemed to hold its breath as he finally stood face to face with the girl. Time seemed suspended between the two, a man who had built walls around his own past, and a child who carried that same past in her eyes. The security guards loosened their grip as they saw the man in the suit approach with firm steps, although his face betrayed an unusual paleness. There was something in the millionaire's posture, an aura of natural authority that emanated from every calculated gesture that made the men instinctively back away. "What's going on here?" The tone was controlled, almost cold, but there was a subtle vibration in his words, like a violin string about to snap. "Standard procedure, sir," replied the older security guard, adjusting his cap. "Homeless people aren't allowed to be in the square bothering people, especially children without adult supervision." The man seemed genuinely embarrassed now, as if only at that moment did he realize the violence of dragging a girl by the arms. The child remained motionless, her eyes never leaving the millionaire's face. Up close, he could see the clear signs of life on the streets: hair dried by the sun, dirty nails, small scratches on her arms and legs. But there was a dignity in her posture that contradicted the torn clothes and bare feet. "What's your name?" he finally asked, his voice betraying him with a subtle tremor. Instead of answering, the girl plunged her hand into the torn pocket of the coat that was too big for her skeletal frame. From there, she retrieved a piece of yellowed photo folded so many times that the fold lines formed a network of scars on the paper. "She told me to wait here." The words came out in a rough whisper. "Every year, on the same day, she said you would come to get me." The millionaire felt his legs weaken as she extended the piece of photograph. With trembling fingers, he accepted the paper, unfolding it with almost reverent care. It was half of an old beach photo. In it, a younger man with longer hair and a carefree smile hugged someone who had been cut out of the picture. But the most disturbing thing was the scar on his left wrist, a crescent-shaped mark he had gotten in an accident in his teens, and that now, under the perfectly pressed sleeve of his shirt, seemed to burn his skin. "This doesn't prove anything," he said in a hoarse voice, more to himself than to the girl. "I have one too." The child pulled up her ragged sleeve, revealing a small crescent-shaped mark, almost identical to his, only smaller and softer. The world around the millionaire seemed to spin, a hereditary birthmark that ran through his family for generations. His father had one, his grandfather had one, and now this girl. "Where's your mother?" The words came out strangled from his throat. The child's eyes filled with tears she refused to shed. "She went back to the stars last winter. Before, she told me that you would come to this bench, in this square, like you promised her." A flashback hit the millionaire with the force of a train. Him, young and in love, sitting on this very bench with the woman he loved, promising to meet her there exactly 1 year later, no matter where they were. A romantic tradition they had, kept for 3 years, until the final argument. "How long have you been waiting?" he asked, unable to fully digest what was happening. 312 days, the girl replied without hesitation, as if reciting a sacred count. "I come here every morning. The security guards kick me out. I come back. Today..." She hesitated, her voice failing. "Today is the day you promised her." Their anniversary, the date they met, 10 years ago. "You have a mark on your hand," the girl continued with relentless logic. "Like the man in the picture my mother kept. Like mine." The security guards looked confused, while a small crowd began to form at a respectful distance. The millionaire barely noticed, his mind a whirlwind of memories, regrets, and possibilities that opened like an abyss beneath his feet. "You don't have to believe me," the girl said, suddenly older than her few years. "She said you wouldn't. Believe me at first, said you were as stubborn as a mule." A ghost of a sad smile danced on her lips. "But she also said that you always kept promises, even if it took a while." The millionaire felt something wet on his face and realized, shocked, that they were tears, the first he had shed in years. With an automatic gesture, he extended his hand to the girl. "I think we need to talk," he said, surprised by the firmness he found in his own voice. The millionaire's office occupied the top floor of a mirrored glass skyscraper with panoramic views of the entire city. Behind the solid oak desk, the wall was made up of floor-to-ceiling windows, creating the sensation that the space floated among the clouds. An environment designed to impress and, above all, to intimidate. However, none of this seemed to affect the girl sitting in front of him. She watched everything with observant eyes, absorbing every detail without showing the slightest sign of admiration or intimidation. Her small, calloused hands rested calmly on her lap, contrasting with the new, clean clothes that the millionaire had rushed to buy on the way. "These clothes itch," was the only comment she made about the Egyptian cotton set that probably cost more than many families spent in an entire month. The millionaire remained standing, unable to sit, as if the movement could somehow commit him to a reality he was not yet ready to accept. His personal assistant had been dismissed, as had all the afternoon's appointments. For the first time in years, the empire could wait. "You don't look like her," the girl said abruptly, breaking the tense silence that had settled between them. "In the stories, you smiled more." The comment hit him like a punch in the stomach. He remembered being that man, the one who smiled, the one who made promises under the starry sky, the one who believed that the world could be conquered with love and determination. Before the betrayals, the disappointments, the moral compromises that were gradually abandoned in the name of success. What stories did she tell about me? The question escaped before he could contain it. The girl tilted her head slightly, studying him like a scientist studies a rare specimen. "That you were brave, that you had fire in your eyes, that you promised to build a castle for her, but ended up building one for yourself and forgot to make the door for her to enter." Each word was a precise dagger, sharpened by years of absence. The millionaire walked to the window, observing the city he had helped shape. Below, tiny cars and people went about their lives, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the heights. "That's not how it happened," he said finally, the words bitter in his mouth. "She left, disappeared without leaving an address. I looked." He stopped, realizing the weakness of his own justification. Yes, he had looked, but for how long? With how much effort, really? "She said you would look in the wrong places." The girl replied with disconcerting simplicity. "In the expensive hotels, in the houses of rich friends. Not at her aunt's house, where the roof leaked and the coffee was weak." The millionaire felt his face burn with shame. It was true. He had never considered that the woman he knew, proud, independent, unwavering in her principles, could return to the poverty she had fought so hard to leave behind. "Why didn't she look for me later? Why didn't she say about—" He couldn't finish the sentence, the concept of fatherhood still too foreign a territory to name. The girl shrugged, a gesture so adult that it seemed out of place in that childish body. "Pride, the two of you together could fill this building." For the first time, a genuine smile played on her lips. She always said that. A knot formed in the millionaire's throat. That sounded exactly like something she would say, direct, honest, without beating around the bush. The pain of loss, dormant for years of denial, now awakened with renewed force. What happened to her? How did she— Again, the words failed. "Cancer," the girl replied, the short, brutal word hanging in the air conditioning of the office. "Fast and expensive. We sold everything. Then there was nowhere else to go." The millionaire closed his eyes, imagining that vibrant woman consumed by the disease, selling her possessions, facing the end alone, all while he accumulated wealth a few miles away, protected by his fortress of glass and steel. "And after she was gone, where did you stay?" "Here and there," she replied vaguely. "The landlord gave us 2 weeks. After that, the square seemed like a good place to wait." The image was unbearable. This child, his daughter, sleeping on park benches, under awnings, always returning to the meeting point, arranged by a mother who knew she wouldn't be there to fulfill her part of the promise. The phone on the desk rang, reminding him of the outside world that continued to spin. The millionaire ignored it for the first time in years, allowing a call to go unanswered. "You don't believe I'm your daughter," the girl stated, not as an accusation, but as a fact. "That's okay. She said you'd want proof." She took a crumpled envelope out of her pocket and handed it to him. Inside, a folded birth certificate and a small flash drive. "The test is already done," she said with the pragmatic logic of someone who grew up too fast. "She kept a sample of your DNA, said one day you'd need to be sure." The millionaire took the envelope with trembling hands, feeling simultaneously exposed and admired. Even at the end, she knew him better than he knew himself. "What if the test comes back negative?" he asked, hating himself for the question the moment the words left his mouth. The girl held his gaze without wavering. "She said that even then, you'd help me. Because deep down, beneath all that money, there's still the man who promised never to leave anyone behind." The knot in the millionaire's chest tightened further as a distant voice in his mind wondered who, after all, was this child sitting in front of him, and who he himself had become to need a 7-year-old girl to remind him of the man he once promised to be. Night fell over the city as the millionaire remained sitting in his office, the envelope still sealed on the desk. The girl had been temporarily placed under the care of his housekeeper, a middle-aged woman with a stern face but kind eyes, who seemed strangely unsurprised when he arrived with an unknown child. "She needs a bath, a hot meal, and a decent bed," were his only instructions before locking himself back in the ivory tower he called an office. Now alone with his thoughts, the millionaire finally connected the laptop and inserted the flash drive. The blue screen flickered before revealing a single folder titled simply, "For You." Inside, 2 files, a PDF document and a video. His fingers hovered indecisively over the trackpad before clicking on the video. The face that appeared on the screen hit him like an electric shock. Thinner, with shorter hair, deep dark circles marking the once radiant face. But the eyes, those eyes that had bewitched him the first time they met, maintained the same hypnotic intensity. "Hi, stranger," she began with a weak smile. "If you're seeing this, it means our daughter managed to find you. Always knew she would. She's got your stubbornness." The millionaire felt his breath catch. "I won't take up too much of your precious time," continued the voice from the past, with a hint of irony that made his heart clench. "I know how much every minute is worth to a man like you. Never forgot it." A cough interrupted her words, and she took a sip of water before continuing. "The doctors say I have a few weeks, maybe a month. Enough time to plan, not enough to regret. You always admired my practicality, didn't you?" The tears now streamed freely down the millionaire's face, something that hadn't happened since his father's funeral 15 years before. "I'm not going to apologize for keeping her hidden. You made it clear that night that a child wasn't in your plans. An obstacle to our dreams was how you defined it when you saw the pregnancy test." She paused, taking a deep breath. "The funny thing is, she became my whole dream after that." The millionaire covered his face with his hands, remembering that terrible night. The panic he felt upon seeing the positive test, the fear of compromising his ambitious plans, the cruel words he said in the heat of the moment, words he would give his entire fortune to take back now. "But I didn't record this to make you feel guilty," she continued, as if guessing his thoughts through time. "I recorded it because she deserves to know where she comes from, and you deserve the chance to be better than you were, better than your own father was to you." The blow was well aimed, hitting the core of his deepest insecurities. His entire Life had been shaped by the desire to surpass his father, a cruel and distant man who measured the worth of people by the size of their bank accounts. The DNA test is in the file next to it. Not that you need it. Just look at her to see. Yourself reflected, but I know you've always been a man of facts, not faith. She smiled sadly. Another thing we always disagreed on. A noise off-screen caught her attention, and she looked to the side, her face lighting up with a love so pure that it hurt to watch. "I'm coming, honey. Just one more minute." Turning back to the camera, her expression became serious. "I don't know what will happen when I'm gone. I have some friends who promised to take care of her, but life is complicated for everyone. So I'm betting on the man I knew, not on the one you've become. I'm betting that despite everything, you're still capable of loving something besides success and money." She moved closer to the camera, as if she wanted to touch him through the screen. "If you open your heart to her, you'll find it's the best investment you've ever made. And if you can't..." Her voice faltered for the first time. "If you can't, just make sure she has a better chance than we had." But the screen went black for a few seconds before returning with a final image. Her holding the girl's hand, both smiling at the camera. A handwritten note appeared in the foreground. "We'll be waiting in the square every 17th until you show up." The video ended, leaving the office silent except for the almost inaudible sound of the millionaire's tears falling onto the keyboard. With trembling hands, he opened the second file, a DNA test performed by a reputable laboratory, comparing samples that she had somehow saved from him. The result flashed on the screen with the cold certainty of numbers, probability of paternity, 99.9998%. For a long moment, the millionaire remained motionless, absorbing the truth he could no longer deny. Then, slowly, he rose and walked to the window. The reflection staring back at him in the glass was no longer that of the business titan, the man who inspired fear and respect in equal measure. It was just the reflection of an ordinary man facing the consequences of his choices. The city shone below, indifferent to the drama unfolding in the heights. Somewhere in that sea of lights, an improbable bed sheltered his daughter, a stranger carrying his blood, his unclaimed name, part of his face. What would he do now? The millionaire's mansion, a monument of glass and concrete nestled on top of a hill overlooking the ocean, rarely received visitors beyond carefully selected business partners. The space, designed by an award-winning architect, possessed clean lines and minimalist environments that reflected the practical and detached character of its owner. That morning, however, the usual silence was broken by an unexpected sound. The hesitant clinking of silverware against porcelain coming from the rarely used dining room. The millionaire stopped at the entrance, observing the surreal scene. The girl, sitting at the long table, her short legs swinging without reaching the ground, while the housekeeper served an elaborate breakfast. "Good morning," he said, feeling strangely formal and out of place in his own home. "Did you sleep well?" The girl looked up from her plate of pancakes, obviously her first decent meal in a long time, judging by the enthusiasm with which she chewed slowly, swallowed, and only then replied with a disconcerting seriousness. "The bed is too soft. It feels like I'm sinking into clouds. I couldn't sleep properly." The housekeeper shot a surprised glance at her boss, but quickly recovered her professional expression. "I can arrange for a firmer mattress today, miss." "Thank you," replied the girl, with a politeness that contrasted with her still disheveled appearance despite the new clothes and bath. "But you don't need to call me miss. I'm nobody important." The millionaire felt a sharp pang in his chest. In his world, titles and formalities were tools of power, status markers that defined every interaction. Hearing that child, his daughter, declare herself nobody important was a painful reminder of the abyss that separated them. "Everyone in this house is important," he said, surprising himself with the firmness in his voice. He checked his wristwatch, an automatic gesture of someone who has every minute accounted for. "I have some meetings today, but we can talk in the afternoon about arrangements." The girl nodded, returning her attention to the pancakes. "That's okay. I can wait. I'm good at waiting." Again, that cutting simplicity that left him speechless. The millionaire realized that he was used to people who tried to impress him, win him over, manipulate him. The child's raw sincerity disarmed him completely. "I'll reschedule my meetings," he decided abruptly. "I think we could take a walk, get to know the property." He couldn't say what surprised him more, his own spontaneous offer or the small smile that lit up the girl's face. Hours later, the two walked through the extensive garden of the mansion. The girl observed everything with the natural curiosity of childhood, but there was something restrained in her movements, as if she feared occupying too much space in that world that was not hers. "Your mother, did she ever talk about what happened between us?" the millionaire finally asked, unable to contain the question that tormented him. The girl stopped in front of a blue butterfly resting on a flower. "She said that you wanted different things, that you had a dream too big to fit another person in it." The words hit him like precise stones, each finding exactly the vulnerable point in his carefully constructed armor. It was true. In his obsession with success, with proving his worth, he had charted a path that did not allow deviations, not even for love. "And did she tell you why she disappeared? Why she never told me about you?" The girl shrugged, an uncomfortably adult gesture. "She said she tried once. You were at an important party with important people. She was waiting in the hotel lobby with a big belly." The millionaire felt the color drain from his face. He remembered that night, the cocktail party that sealed his first big deal, surrounded by investors and celebrities. The receptionist had mentioned that a woman insisted on seeing him, but he was too busy paving his future. He had ordered them to tell her to make an appointment with his secretary. "I didn't know," he murmured, more to himself than to the girl. "She knew you didn't know." She wasn't angry, just sad. They arrived at a small bench under a century-old tree. They sat side by side, watching the ocean in the distance. Two disproportionate figures, separated by size, age, and experience, but united by a biological bond that neither knew yet how to navigate. "What's going to happen to me now?" The question came suddenly, so direct that it caught him off guard. "Are you going to send me away?" For the first time since he had found her, the millionaire saw beyond the forced maturity, beyond the courage and determination. He saw the fear in the girl's eyes, the fear of another rejection, of another abandonment. "No," he replied, and the firmness in his own voice surprised him. "You're staying here." "For how long?" The question hung between them, laden with weight. How long? A day? A week? Until the novelty wore off and he went back to getting lost in meetings and deals, until the child started disrupting his perfectly orchestrated routine. "For as long as you need," he finally replied, surprising himself with the sincerity of the words. "This is your home now. I am..." The word father got stuck in his throat, still an unexplored territory, intimidating in its meaning and responsibility. "I'm your family," he completed finally. The girl didn't smile, didn't thank him, didn't show visible relief. Instead, she nodded solemnly, as if accepting the terms of a contract. "She said you were a man of your word," she commented simply. And at that moment, under the shadow of the century-old tree, the millionaire made a silent promise to the woman he had loved and lost. He would be worthy of the trust placed in him, even if he didn't deserve it. The days that followed established a strange routine in the mansion. The millionaire, for the first time in 2 decades, began working from home, leaving the city office in the care of his subordinates. The housekeeper, with silent efficiency, arranged for private tutors to assess the girl's educational level, which proved surprisingly advanced for someone who had missed almost a year of school. She read to me in the hospitals, the child explained when the literature teacher expressed amazement at her vocabulary. Then I read to her when she got too tired to turn the pages. These small revelations about the life she had shared with her mother fell like acid drops on the millionaire's heart. The image of her, withering in a hospital bed, while this small child struggled to be strong, to be helpful, haunted his nights. On the morning of the 7th day, while they were having coffee together, a silent ritual they had established. Without discussion, the doorbell of the mansion rang, something so unusual that both raised their heads in sync. The housekeeper returned to the dining room with a worried expression. "Sir, there's a man who insists on seeing you, says he's from the press." The millionaire frowned. His public relations team handled all media requests, and no journalist ever made it to his door without a prior appointment. "Send him away," he ordered dryly. But before the housekeeper could leave, the girl interrupted. "It's because of me." It wasn't a question, but a statement. "They saw me with you in the square. Now they want to know who I am." The millionaire felt a chill run down his spine. Of course, the scene in the square, the ragged girl calling for her father, the security guards, his approach. In a world of smartphones and social media, it would be naive to believe that the incident would go unnoticed. "How do you know this?" he asked, studying her with renewed interest. The girl shrugged, that adult gesture that always disconcerted him. "I heard the security guards talking yesterday. They said it was on the internet, a video." The silence that followed was broken by the insistent ringing of the millionaire's cell phone. It was his press officer for the 3rd time that morning. He had ignored the first 2 calls. "I'll call you later," he said as he answered, but was interrupted by an urgent voice on the other end. "There is no later. It's everywhere. Who is the girl is trending. We have to issue an official statement before the speculation gets completely out of control." The outside world, which the millionaire had kept at a distance for a week, now invaded his fortress. With a gesture to the housekeeper, he indicated that she should take the girl to another room. The child allowed herself to be led away without protest, but her eyes, those disturbingly wise eyes, communicated that she understood perfectly what was happening. An hour later, after several calls and a virtual conference with his legal and public relations team, the millionaire had a real sense of the storm that was brewing. The video, filmed by a student in the square, had been viewed millions of times. Journalists investigated his past, speculations about the identity of the child multiplied, and even the value of his company's shares began to fluctuate. "We need a controlled narrative," insisted the head of public relations. "Something that calms investors and humanizes the situation without compromising your public image. We can claim it's a case of social mentorship," suggested another advisor, "part of a philanthropic program not previously disclosed. That would explain the child's presence and even potentially enhance your image positively." The millionaire listened in silence, a cold anger growing in his chest. This was how the world worked in his circles. Everything was a matter of image, of controlled perception, of truths carefully edited to serve a purpose. "And if it's a story about fatherhood," suggested an image consultant, "we can format it as a journey of discovery and responsibility. Controlled vulnerability tends to generate empathy and—" "Enough," interrupted the millionaire, his voice cutting through the discussion like a blade. "There will be no fabricated narratives. Not this time." The girl was waiting in the garden, sitting on the same bench under the century-old tree. When he approached, she showed no surprise. "They want you to lie about me," she said, not as a question, but as a statement of fact. The millionaire sat down beside her, feeling the weight of the world on his shoulders. How do you know so much? How do you understand things that children your age shouldn't even comprehend? The girl looked at the horizon, where the sky met the sea in an infinite line. You grow up fast when you have to. For a moment they were silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Then the girl turned to him, her eyes reflecting a maturity that transcended her age. She lied for you, she said quietly. All these years, when they asked about my father, she said he was a good man who couldn't stay. She never said you didn't want me. The words hit the millionaire like a physical blow. The pain was almost unbearable, not only for the past he couldn't change, but for the unexpected generosity of the woman he had abandoned. I didn't know about you, he said finally, his voice choked. If I had known... It doesn't matter now, the girl interrupted, with surprising objectivity. What matters is what you're going to do. The question, so simple and so profound, hung between them. What would he do? Would he continue to protect the fortress he had built, maintaining appearances at any cost? Or would he finally face the truth he had fled for so many years? I want to show you something, he said, rising and extending his hand. He led her through the garden, then through the corridors of the mansion to a door that remained always closed. The millionaire hesitated for a second before inserting the key into the lock. No one, not even the housekeeper, was allowed to enter. That room, the door opened, revealing a small personal office. Unlike the rest of the house, with its minimalist and impersonal decor, that space was a sanctuary of memories. Photos on the walls, books piled up, apparently banal objects preserved like relics. In the center, on a dark wood desk, a single framed photo. The millionaire picked it up carefully and handed it to the girl. In it, a young couple smiled at the camera, him thinner and with longer hair, her radiant in a simple dress, the wind tousling her hair. This was the last picture we took together, he said softly. 2 weeks before that fight, before I messed everything up. The girl studied the image intently, her fingers caressing her mother's face in the portrait. She kept one just like it. She said it was the happiest day. Flower Island, he confirmed, the memory so vivid that it hurt. We decided to get away for a weekend. No cell phones, no commitments. Just the two of us. And me, completed the girl quietly. I was already there, you just didn't know it yet. The impact of that simple observation made the millionaire recoil as if he had been hit. Yes, she was already there, a life in formation, invisible but present, a silent witness to a love that would soon be destroyed by ambition and fear. You know what I'm going to do? He said finally, a new determination in his voice. I'm going to tell the truth, all of it. The official statement was published simultaneously on all communication channels of the millionaire's companies, as well as on his personal social media profile, an account that had remained virtually inactive for years, used only for occasional corporate pronouncements. The message was simple, direct, devoid of the rhetorical flourishes that his public relations team so cherished. The girl seen with me in the square is my biological daughter. Her mother recently passed away. I was unaware of her existence until our meeting. Now I know, and I fully assume my responsibility as a father. I ask for respect for my daughter's privacy during this period of adaptation. There will be no further comments on this matter. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. In the minutes following the publication, the millionaire's phone didn't stop ringing. Frantic advisors, worried business partners, journalists hungry for details. He ignored them all. You didn't have to do that, the girl said when he showed her the statement before publishing it. There was no accusation in her voice, just a genuine curiosity. Yes, I did, he replied simply. For you, for your mother, and for me too. The next morning, as the newspapers splashed sensational headlines and television programs debated the moral and legal aspects of the case, the millionaire received a call he couldn't ignore. His younger brother. "We need to talk. In person," was all he said, in a tone that brooked no refusal. They hadn't seen each other in almost 2 years. The relationship, never close, had deteriorated completely after their parents' death. Disputes over the inheritance, old resentments, incompatible worldviews, all contributed to the definitive estrangement. Still, the brother remained a minority shareholder in some of the millionaire's companies, a connection he hadn't been able to completely sever. The meeting was scheduled for that same afternoon at the city office. The millionaire hesitated to leave the girl even for a few hours. "I'll be fine," she assured him, with that disconcerting maturity. "Your housekeeper promised to teach me how to make cookies." Something about that domestic normalcy, as foreign to him as the concept of fatherhood, caused a lump in his throat. With an awkward nod, he got into the car that awaited him. The brother was already waiting when he arrived at the office. Younger by only 3 years, but looking a decade older, consumed by excesses and bitterness. Sitting casually in the armchair intended for visitors, he displayed a cold smile that didn't reach his eyes. "So it's true," he said without preamble, raising a glass of whiskey that he had poured himself without invitation. "The great and powerful has finally stumbled. A bastard daughter. The press is in a frenzy." "Don't call her that," replied the millionaire, his voice low and controlled, but laden with an implicit threat. "And if you came only to provoke, this meeting is over." The brother laughed, a harsh and humorless sound. "I'm here as a family member and concerned shareholder. Your shares have plummeted 8% since yesterday. The board is in a panic. Investors are questioning your stability." "My stability," repeated the millionaire, feeling a cold anger growing in his chest. "Because I publicly acknowledged my daughter? Because you admitted to abandoning a pregnant woman?" exploded the brother, slamming the glass on the table. "Because you confirmed all the rumors about your character that your lawyers have been working for years to suppress? Because now, suddenly, there's an heiress that no one knows, with a claim to a fortune that many believed would one day be—" He stopped abruptly, realizing he had said too much. "Mine," completed the millionaire, the understanding finally dawning. "A fortune that you believed would one day be yours." The silence that followed confirmed his suspicion. The brother had always lived in his shadow, less disciplined, less focused, eternally resentful of his success. The hope of one day inheriting the empire had probably been the only reason to maintain a semblance of family relationship. "You don't understand the consequences of what you've done," resumed the brother, changing strategy. "This child you barely know, raised God knows how, by a woman who chose to disappear instead of fighting for her rights. How can you be sure it's not a trap, a con artist? Have you done an official DNA test?" Each word was a stone thrown deliberately, testing the limits of the millionaire's patience. He remained silent, watching the brother as one assesses an opponent in a chess game. "If you're really determined to go through with this madness," continued the brother, interpreting the silence as hesitation, "at least do things right. Legal recognition process, psychological evaluation of the girl, supervised adaptation period. There are protocols for these situations precisely to protect everyone involved." For a moment, the millionaire almost considered that there was genuine concern in the brother's words. Then he realized the true intention: delays, bureaucracy, procedures that would drag the process out for months or years, enough time to undermine any bond that might form between him and the girl. "I've done what needed to be done," he replied, finally, rising in a gesture that clearly ended the meeting. "The DNA test is complete. The paternity acknowledgement papers are being provided. As for the rest, it's a matter for me and my daughter." The brother also stood up, the mask of concern replaced by an expression of pure contempt. You'll regret it. When she starts causing problems, when the novelty wears off, and you realize you destroyed everything you built because of a sentimental impulse, don't come asking me for help. He headed to the door but stopped before leaving, turning with a last malicious smile. By the way, the lawyers have already filed a custody evaluation request. As a shareholder concerned about the future of the family business, I have the right to question your ability to make such impulsive decisions. The door closed behind him, leaving the millionaire alone with the revelation that the storm he faced was just the beginning. That night, upon returning to the mansion, he found the girl in the kitchen, covered in flour to her hair, a genuine smile on her face as she proudly displayed a batch of crooked cookies. "I made them for you," she said simply, holding out a plate. The contrast between the purity of that moment and the battle that loomed was almost unbearable. How to explain to a child that, even being the legitimate daughter of one of the most powerful men in the country, she would have to fight for the right to remain by his side? Looking into those hopeful eyes, the millionaire made a decision. No matter the cost, no matter the consequences. This time, he wouldn't run from his responsibilities. This time, he would keep his promise. The cookies tasted terrible. Even with all the goodwill in the world, the millionaire couldn't disguise his expression as he bit into the first one, an unfortunate mix of too much salt and too little sugar, with a texture that was simultaneously rubbery and crumbly. The housekeeper, standing strategically behind the girl, made desperate gestures, indicating that he should pretend to appreciate them. It wasn't necessary. The millionaire swallowed bravely, ignoring the taste, focusing only on the child's anxious gaze. "Those are the best I've ever eaten," he declared, with a conviction that surprised himself. The smile that lit up the girl's face was worth every second of gastronomic torture. It was the first time he had seen her truly smile, not that restrained half-smile, not the ghost of joy that sometimes appeared in her eyes, but a genuine, broad smile that completely transformed her face. At that moment, something changed. Inside him, a strange, almost forgotten sensation, like a long dormant muscle being exercised again. His chest felt simultaneously lighter and fuller, and he realized with astonishment that he was happy, genuinely happy, in a way he hadn't experienced in years. "Can I make more tomorrow?" she asked, encouraged by the positive reaction. "Every day, if you want," he replied, surprising the housekeeper, who knew very well his obsession with healthy and regulated eating. That night marked the beginning of a new phase. In the days that followed, while lawyers battled in court and the media speculated relentlessly, the millionaire and the girl established their own routine, building bridges over the abyss that the years of separation had created. They were fragile bridges, it was true, made of small moments, the shared discovery that they both preferred the frosted part of the cake, the girl's astonishment at learning that he had never played hopscotch, the first time she dared to ask him a question about the past. "How did you meet my mother?" she inquired one night, while he was trying, without much success, to braid her hair before bed. The millionaire hesitated, his hands briefly losing their rhythm. And talking about her still hurt, not only because of the loss, but because of the guilt he carried. However, looking at the child through the mirror, he saw that she deserved the truth. She deserved to know her own history. "In a bookstore?" he replied finally, a slight nostalgic smile on his lips. "She worked there to pay for college. I had just sold my first patent and decided to treat myself to books I never had time to read." "She liked bookstores," confirmed the girl, her gaze, distant as if accessing a precious memory. "Said they smelled like endless possibilities." The millionaire felt his throat tighten. It was exactly the kind of thing she would say. "She called me a snob," he continued, resuming the awkward braid, "because I only wanted hardcover books, new ones. She said the best books were the used ones that had already been loved by someone before. And did you buy the used ones? Not that day, he admitted, but I came back the next day. And the next, until I finally invited her for coffee and asked her to show me why the used books were better. The girl smiled at him through the mirror, a new complicity shining in her eyes. And were they? They were, he confirmed, finishing the crooked braid with a colorful elastic band, like she always was right about almost everything. During the day, while the girl had lessons with the tutors, the millionaire worked in his home office, managing the empire from afar, facing the storm of problems unleashed by his decision. The lawyers reported on the progress of the custody process. The shares remained unstable. Business partners demanded explanations. He faced everything with renewed determination, as if each obstacle only strengthened his resolve. At night, however, the whole outside world was suspended. It was their time to talk, to discover, to build. Slowly, day after day, the girl began to trust, to lower the defenses that years of uncertainty and abandonment had erected. A week after the brothers' visit, the millionaire received the news he feared. The judge had accepted the request for a psychosocial evaluation as part of the paternity recognition and custody definition process. Court experts would come to the mansion to assess the conditions of the environment, and more worryingly, the girl would be subjected to interviews with psychologists to determine her best interest. How to explain to a 7-year-old child that even being a legitimate daughter, recognized by her biological father, she still needed to prove her right to remain with him. That night, after the bedtime reading routine, a habit that he had discovered was sacred to her, the millionaire finally gathered the courage to address the subject. "Some people are coming to visit us in the next few days," he began hesitantly, sitting on the edge of the bed while the girl watched him with sleepy eyes. "They're going to ask questions about you, about me, about how we're adapting. Your brother still wants to send me away," she said, without a trace of question in her voice. At his surprised look, she shrugged. "I heard the lawyers talking when they came here yesterday." Once again, her keen perception surprised him. "Yes," he admitted, seeing little point in hiding the truth. "He doesn't think I'm qualified to be your father." "And do you think you are?" The question, so direct and so profound, caught him off guard. The millionaire considered lying, saying what an adult would normally say to a child to reassure her. But something in her gaze, that maturity beyond her years, that ability to see through masks, demanded honesty. "I don't know," he confessed, finally. "I never planned to be a father. I never prepared for it. I'm probably going to make a lot of mistakes." The girl nodded, absorbing his words. "Mum made mistakes too," she said simply. "Once, she forgot my lunch. Another time, she yelled at me when she was too tired from treatment. Then she cried and apologized." "Did that make her a bad mother?" he asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. "No," replied the girl with conviction. "It made her human." The millionaire felt something warm expand in his chest, a feeling for which he had no name, bigger and deeper than gratitude or affection. There, in that childish room, decorated in haste with everything that his consultants had said was appropriate for a 7-year-old girl, a child was offering him the most valuable of gifts, the permission to be imperfect. "I'm scared," he admitted, the words escaping before he could contain them. "Of not being what you need, of disappointing you like I disappointed your mother." The girl reached out a small hand and placed it on his, a gesture so simple and so powerful that it almost made him lose his composure. "I'm scared too," she confessed, "that you'll get tired of me, that you'll realize I'm too much work, of having to go back to the square." The shared vulnerability created between them at that moment, a bond stronger than any biological tie. They were two survivors, two souls damaged by life, trying to find their way back to each other. "We won't get tired of you," he promised, with more certainty than he had ever felt in any business deal or investment. "And you're not going back to the square. Not ever again." "How can I be sure?" she asked, her small voice revealing at last the vulnerable child behind the facade of maturity. The millionaire thought for a moment, then extended his pinky finger. "Pinky promise," he said, remembering a ritual from his own distant childhood. "The most sacred of all promises." The girl looked at the outstretched finger, then at his face, searching for any sign of deceit or condescension. Finding only sincerity, she intertwined her pinky with his. "Pinky promise," she repeated solemnly. That night, as he watched her sleep, the millionaire made another promise, this one silent. He would do whatever it took to keep that child safe, even if it meant confronting his brother, the press, the entire judicial system, even if it meant defying the world he had built for himself. "How do you feel living with him?" The question hung in the air of the room, specially prepared for the psychological evaluation. The forensic psychologist, a middle-aged woman with a neutral expression and a notepad on her lap, waited patiently while the girl considered her answer. "Safe," the child said finally, fiddling distractedly with a doll that didn't even seem to interest her much. "The bed is too soft, but I'm getting used to it." "Do you talk? Do you spend time together?" The girl nodded. "He taught me how to ride a bike yesterday. I fell 3 times. He also fell once, trying to show me how to make turns." A ghost of a smile crossed the psychologist's lips, quickly suppressed by professionalism. "And how was that for you, seeing an adult make mistakes?" The child seemed confused by the question. "Adults make mistakes all the time," she replied, as if explaining something obvious. "My mom said that only those who don't try don't make mistakes." On the other side of the mirrored glass, the millionaire watched the interaction with a heavy heart. The psychological evaluation had already lasted 2 days. First, interviews with him, exhaustive questioning about his motives, emotional capacity, plans for the future. Then the analysis of the physical environment, experts inspecting every inch of the mansion, assessing everything from the safety of the outlets to the contents of the refrigerator. Now it was the girl's turn, subjected to long sessions of questions and activities designed to assess her emotional state, her bond with him, her adaptation to the new reality. The millionaire watched, powerless, as his daughter navigated the minefield of questions with a wisdom that oscillated between touching and devastating. "Do you understand why you are here, in this house, with this man?" continued the psychologist, maintaining a neutral tone. The girl put the doll aside and faced the evaluator with a disconcerting seriousness. "Because he's my father, and because my mother believed that he would take care of me when she couldn't anymore." "Do you miss her, your mother?" A brief flash of pain crossed the child's face, quickly contained. "Every day," she replied simply. But she said it was normal to miss her and still be happy at the same time. Behind the glass, the millionaire felt a warm tear roll down his face. He didn't wipe it away. The psychologist made some notes before continuing. "If you could change one thing about your life now, what would it be?" The girl reflected for a moment that he didn't have to work so much. Sometimes he stays on the computer late, even when he says he's done. The observation, so simple and so accurate, hit the millionaire like an arrow. It was true. Even having drastically reduced his workload, he still took refuge in spreadsheets and reports when the anxiety of being a father became overwhelming. The girl had noticed. Of course she had. The session continued for another hour. When it finally ended, the millionaire waited anxiously in the hallway. He saw his daughter emerge from the room with her shoulders slightly slumped, the weariness evident in her posture. Upon seeing him, however, Her face lit up with a small smile. Not the full smile he had seen during the cookie episode, but still, a smile directed exclusively at him. The millionaire felt a wave of protection so intense that it almost knocked him over. "How was it?" he asked, crouching down to be at her level. The girl shrugged. "Tiring. Adults ask too many questions." The comment drew a spontaneous laugh from him. "Yes, we do. Sorry about that." "It's okay," she replied, taking his hand naturally, a gesture that had become frequent in recent days. "Can we get ice cream now?" The simplicity of the request, the normalcy it represented amidst all that chaos, made the millionaire's heart clench. "Of course we can," he replied, feeling for the first time in days really in control of something. As they left the building, however, they were greeted by a wall of flashes and microphones. Journalists had discovered the location of the psychological evaluation. "Is it true that your brother is contesting custody? Does the girl have psychological problems after living on the streets? Did you really not know about her existence? Or are you using the child to improve your public image?" The questions came like bullets, each more invasive than the last. The millionaire felt the small hand squeeze his tightly. Instinctively, he positioned himself in front of the girl, protecting her with his body. "No comment," he repeated, as he made his way towards the car that awaited them, feeling the anger grow with each step. That's when he heard his brother's voice. "The public has the right to know how a child raised in poverty can affect the balance of a man responsible for companies that employ thousands," he shouted to the journalists gathered across the street, clearly positioned to be seen. "As a shareholder, I have a duty to question impulsive decisions that can compromise not only a family fortune, but an entire economic ecosystem." Something inside the millionaire threatened to break. A primal fury, a protective instinct that he didn't even know he possessed. He took a step in the direction of his brother, ready to confront him publicly, to expose his true motivations. Then he felt a tug on his sleeve. The girl looked up at him, her eyes pleading silently, not for protection or comfort, he realized with astonishment, but offering reassurance, as if she, a 7-year-old child who until weeks ago slept on park benches, was worried about his well-being. The realization was like a cold shower, dissipating the anger instantly. With a last look of contempt at his brother, the millionaire lifted his daughter into his arms and carried her quickly to the car, ignoring the reporter's shouts. Already in the vehicle, protected by the tinted windows, he waited for her to cry, to show fear or anxiety in the face of that chaotic situation. Instead, the girl merely sighed, like a little adult, tired of the follies of the world. "Your brother doesn't like me very much," she observed with simplicity. The millionaire stifled an incredulous laugh. "It's not about you," he explained gently. "It's about me. It always has been." The girl nodded, as if that made perfect sense. "My mom said that some people carry so much anger that they can't see love when it's right in front of them." Once again, her wisdom left him speechless. How was it possible that this child, after everything she had lived through, still saw the world with such clarity? How could she be simultaneously so fragile and so strong? "Can we still get ice cream?" she asked after a moment, as if the chaos of reporters and accusations was just a minor inconvenience in their plans. "2 ice creams," he promised, feeling something warm expand in his chest. "One for now and one for later." The next day, the consequences of the confrontation appeared. In all the headlines, the brother had given an exclusive interview to one of the leading newspapers, detailing his concerns about the millionaire's psychological stability and the girl's legitimacy. The article cited sources close to, suggesting that the whole story could be an elaborate hoax perpetrated by a clever street kid and a businessman in a midlife crisis. The millionaire read it all on his tablet while his daughter had breakfast. He watched her over the edge of the device, the way she ate methodically, alternating between a spoonful of cereal and a sip of orange juice. The small habits he had already begun to identify and appreciate. The way she wrinkled her nose slightly when something intrigued her, the way she hummed softly while thinking. How could anyone look at her and see anything other than an extraordinary child? His phone rang, displaying the name of the lead attorney. He answered after the second ring, aware of the girl's gaze. "Have you seen the news?" asked the voice. On the other end, without preamble, "I have. The judge has scheduled the final hearing for tomorrow. He wants to meet with us earlier with all parties. This wasn't scheduled." The millionaire felt a chill of apprehension. Last-minute changes were rarely a good sign. "What does this mean?" "I don't know," admitted the attorney, the worry evident in his voice. "But your brother seems confident. He's been on all the morning shows, positioning himself as the responsible guardian of the family legacy." After hanging up, the millionaire found the girl watching him with those overly perceptive eyes. "We're going to have to go to court tomorrow," he said, opting for the transparency he had promised himself to maintain with her. "The judge is going to decide if you stay with me." The girl nodded solemnly. "Can I wear the blue dress?" Mom said. "That blue is the color of truth." The millionaire felt the knot in his throat tighten. "Of course you can." That night, while tucking her into bed, he realized how in just a few weeks this routine had become sacred to him. The ritual of arranging the blankets, of checking if the small nightlight was on at the right intensity, of choosing the book for the nightly reading. "What if the judge says no?" she asked suddenly, her voice small in the semi-darkness. The millionaire felt his heart skip a beat. It was the first time she had verbalized the fear that he knew was present, but that they both avoided mentioning. "He won't say it," he replied, wishing he could promise with certainty. "But if he does, I won't give up. Never." The girl studied him for a long moment, assessing the truth in his words. "Pinky promise?" she asked finally, extending her pinky finger. "Pinky promise," he confirmed, intertwining his finger with hers, feeling the sacred weight of that simple oath. The next morning, the courtroom was crowded. Lawyers, social workers, experts, journalists in a separate space. The millionaire's brother sat on the opposite side, surrounded by his own legal team, displaying an expression of carefully rehearsed concern. The girl, wearing the blue dress as promised, remained composed beside the millionaire, her small hands resting on her lap, her eyes observing everything with that intensity that impressed him so much. When the judge entered, a respectful silence took over the room. He was an older man with decades of experience in family law, known for his meticulous approach and his uncompromising prioritization of the well-being of children above any other interests. "Normally," he began after the formal introductions, "cases like this follow a standard procedure. Reports are presented, witnesses are heard, arguments are made. All of this can take weeks, sometimes months." He paused, examining those present over his reading glasses. However, there are situations in which the impact of a prolonged process on the child in question must be considered a priority. The media exposure of this case has reached levels that I consider detrimental to the minor's well-being. The millionaire's heart raced. The judge continued, "I have analyzed all the preliminary reports, including the psychological and social evaluations. And before proceeding with additional procedures, I would like to hear directly from the child." A murmur ran through the room. It was unusual, although not unprecedented, for a judge to choose to hear such a young child in open court. "I believe," clarified the magistrate, as if anticipating objections, "that this young lady has demonstrated sufficient maturity, as attested by all the experts, to express her preferences and feelings clearly." He then turned to the girl, softening his expression. "Would you mind talking to me a little?" he asked gently. She looked at the millionaire, who nodded encouragingly despite his own pounding heart. With small but firm steps, the girl approached the bench. "I understand that this situation is confusing," the judge began. "Many changes in a short time. How do you feel about all of this?" The girl considered the question with the seriousness that she seemed to reserve for every interaction. "It's weird," she admitted finally. "Sleeping in a real bed every night, not having to save food in my pockets for later, not having to hide from people who might take me away." A heavy silence fell over the room. The raw honesty in her words struck everyone, reminding them of the reality that this child had faced. "And about the man who says he's your father," continued the judge without showing emotion. "How do you feel about him?" The girl looked back, meeting the millionaire's eyes across the room. Something passed between them, a silent communication, a mutual understanding that transcended words. "He tries hard," she replied simply. "Sometimes he does things wrong, like putting too much shampoo in my hair or forgetting that I don't, like carrots, but he always tries again, and he never gets mad when I say he's wrong." A faint smile touched the judge's lips, quickly suppressed. "And do you believe that he's really your father?" "I'm sure," affirmed the girl, raising her chin slightly. "We have the same mark." She pulled up her sleeve, revealing the small crescent-shaped scar. "And sometimes, when he doesn't realize I'm watching, he smiles just like the picture my mom kept." "I understand," murmured the judge, making some notes. "One last question. If you could choose, where would you like to live? With whom?" The girl didn't hesitate. "With him," she replied with surprising conviction. "Because he promised, and my mom said that he always keeps his promises, even if it takes a while." The judge studied her for another moment, then nodded, as if he had reached a decision. "Thank you for your honesty. You can go back to your seat now." The millionaire received his daughter with a quick hug, unable to contain the gesture of affection, even in that formal environment. The gleam of tears in his eyes did not go unnoticed by those present. "After considering all the elements of this case," declared the judge after a brief recess, "including the professional evaluations, the personal testimonies, and above all, the visible bond between father and daughter, I determine that permanent custody be granted to the biological father with the condition of quarterly monitoring by social services for a period of 1 year." The relief that flooded the millionaire was so intense that for a moment he feared that his legs would not support him. Beside him, the girl remained strangely calm, as if she had never doubted the outcome. "As for the accusations raised by a plaintiff," continued the judge, turning to the millionaire's brother, "I consider them unfounded and potentially harmful to the child's well-being. I order that all public statements about this case cease immediately, under penalty of substantial fines and possible criminal sanctions for defamation." On the other side of the room, the brother paled visibly, his gaze wavering between anger and disbelief. "One last comment," added the judge, removing his glasses and addressing the millionaire directly. "Fatherhood is not determined solely by DNA tests or birth certificates. It is built day after day, in every choice, in every shared moment. The court has granted you a privilege and a responsibility. Use them wisely." When they left the courtroom, the crowd of reporters waited anxiously. This time, however, the millionaire did not try to escape. Instead, he lifted his daughter into his arms, allowing her to hide her face on his shoulder if she wished, and faced the cameras. "My daughter and I would like to thank the court for its fair decision," he declared firmly. "Now we ask for respect for our privacy as we continue our journey as a family. That's all we are and all we want to be. An ordinary family, learning to walk together." With these words, he got into the car that awaited them, leaving behind the flashes and questions, taking with him the only treasure that really mattered. 6 months had passed since the court's decision. Autumn had turned into winter, winter into spring, and now the first signs of summer were beginning to appear in the mansion's garden, flowers blooming, birds building nests, sunlight stretching. For longer hours each day, similar changes occurred inside the house, less visible perhaps, but equally profound. The millionaire's office had migrated to a space on the ground floor, with French doors facing the garden, allowing him to keep one eye on business and another on his daughter while she played outside. The previously silent corridors now often echoed with laughter or friendly arguments about which movie to watch on weekly movie night. Most of the guest rooms had been transformed. One became a children's library with shelves within easy reach of small hands. Another became a makeshift art studio where paint stains on the carpet were considered improvements, not accidents. The housekeeper, once formal and reserved, could now be found occasionally participating in pillow fort building competitions. On that Saturday morning, the millionaire watched his daughter through the kitchen window. She was kneeling on the grass, absorbed in the task of planting sunflowers, her favorite flower since she had discovered that they always turned to the sun. "Like you," she had explained weeks before with that disconcerting sincerity. "You were also looking for the light, you just didn't know where it was." Now, seeing her dig small holes in the earth with methodical determination, the millionaire felt that familiar expansion in his chest that still surprised him. A love so intense that it sometimes hurt physically, a mixture of joy and fear that no contract or acquisition had ever provoked. The phone vibrated in his pocket. It was a message from his assistant, reminding him of the groundbreaking ceremony scheduled for that afternoon. For a moment, he considered postponing it, spending another day just being a dad. But the girl had insisted that she wanted to be present. "It's important," she had said with that adorable seriousness. "Mum would be proud." Putting the phone away, the millionaire went out to the garden. He approached silently, marveling at his daughter's concentration. Her tongue caught between her teeth as she carefully measured the distance between the seeds. "How's the planting going?" he asked, crouching down beside her. She raised her face, smudged with dirt and illuminated by a smile. No longer that restrained smile of the early days, but a full, confident smile that completely transformed her features. "Almost done," she replied, indicating the row of small mounds of earth. "I put exactly 8 inches between each one, like the book said." The millionaire smiled, constantly impressed with her meticulousness. "We need to get ready soon," he reminded gently. "The groundbreaking is at 2. The girl nodded, planting the last seed before getting up and brushing the excess dirt off her dress, an action that a few months ago would have made him cringe, but that now only made him smile. Clothes could be washed, moments of happiness were irreplaceable. 2 hours later, they stood before a modern 3-story building, surrounded by a small crowd of journalists, employees, and local families. A banner above the main entrance announced, "Aurora Community Center, dedicated to the mothers and children who light our way." The name had been chosen by the girl in honor of her mother's name. "Welcome to the official opening," began the millionaire, addressing those present. "This center represents more than an investment in social infrastructure. It represents a promise. The promise that no child in this community will have to choose between education and food. No mother will have to decide between caring for her children or working to support them." His voice, previously reserved for boardrooms and high-level negotiations, now carried an emotion he did not try to hide. "This space will offer free medical care, legal support, supplemental education, daily meals, and above all, hope. Because everyone deserves a second chance. Everyone deserves to be found." He felt his daughter's small hand squeeze his, transmitting silent strength. He looked at her, so beautiful in her blue dress. the color of truth, as she always insisted, and felt momentarily speechless before the extraordinary journey they had traveled. "I would like to invite my daughter to cut the ribbon with me," he continued, regaining his composure, "because this center exists thanks to her, who taught me that true wealth is not measured in bank accounts, but in transformed hearts." Together, they approached the ceremonial ribbon. He, the business titan who had learned to kneel to build sandcastles. She, the child of the streets who now slept safe every night. Different in so many ways, but united by blood, choice, and above all, love. The scissors cut the ribbon in a synchronized motion. Applause erupted, and the first group of mothers and children entered the building. Families in precarious situations who would receive full support, some leaving temporary shelters, others fleeing abusive relationships, all seeking a new beginning. As they toured the space with the guests, showing the various facilities, the millionaire watched with silent pride as his daughter interacted with the other children, without condescension or detachment, but with the natural empathy of someone who knew the same pain. "Here you can read any book," she explained to a shy boy, showing the children's library. "And if you don't know how to read yet, there are people who read to you. I can read too if you want." Later, when the journalists had already left and only a few families remained exploring the new space, the millionaire found his daughter, sitting alone in the small garden at the back of the building. There was a bench there, identical to the one in the square where they first met, an intentional similarity, a permanent reminder of origins and second chances. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, sitting down beside her. The girl looked at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to appear. Can she see this from where she is? The millionaire felt the familiar contraction in his chest that always accompanied mentions of the girl's mother. "I believe so," he replied honestly. "Is she proud of us?" The question, so simple and so profound, made his eyes water. "I'm sure she is," he said, putting his arm around her small shoulders. "Proud of you especially." The girl leaned against him, a gesture of trust that never failed to move him. "Of both of us," she corrected with conviction, "because now we're a real family." They stayed like that for some time, watching the stars emerge one by one, each like a promise fulfilled, a new beginning in the infinite night sky. "Ready to go home?" asked the millionaire finally. The girl nodded, standing up. Then, with a spontaneity that still surprised him, she stretched out her arms. Without hesitation, he lifted her up, allowing her to settle into his lap as he had so often dreamed of doing in the lonely years of absence. "You know what?" she confided as they walked to the car. "I think the sunflowers we planted today are going to grow really tall." "Why?" he asked, genuinely curious about her reasoning. "Because we planted them together," she replied, as if explaining the obvious. "And things planted with love always grow stronger." The millionaire smiled, marveling once again at the wisdom of that extraordinary child whom fate had placed in his path, not as an obstacle as he had once feared, but as the greatest gift he could ever imagine. And as they drove back to the house that was now truly a home, he made a silent promise to the stars that watched them, that each day would be a new seed planted, each moment an opportunity to grow together, each challenge a chance to prove that some promises, even those forgotten for a time, are always worth fulfilling. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to receive new stories every day. What would you do in the millionaire's place? Comment below and share this story with someone special.